foremost evangelists of digital health is Paul Sonnier, who's now an industry principal for healthcare and life sciences at Frost Sullivan, a great research company themselves. Paul, welcome to the program, and thanks again for contributing today, and looking forward to hearing about what you're doing and what certainly Karthik is doing at Apollo, which is, again, Happy Republic Day for all of those who are either from India or in India. It's very, very appropriate to have Apollo, the biggest health system in India, presenting today. So welcome to you both, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts about JPM.
Thank you, Stan. Really appreciate the intro, and enjoyed Bill and Aaron's comments about JP Morgan. Really fascinating to see what's happening. And I'm really delighted to be joined today by Dr. Karthik Anantharaman. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Yeah.
Great to have you here.
And indeed, a special day for people from India. It's Republic Day, but thanks for your wishes. Thank you. And Paul, yeah, glad to see you again.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Karthik. So real quick, I'll introduce myself. So as Stan mentioned, I'm really been a big evangelist in digital health for over a decade now, starting in, well, you could go back to 2009 when I was focused on wireless health, but it was 2012 was sort of the inflection point when, after analyzing the technology convergence with healthcare for several years, I sort of was inspired to drag this term that was disused called digital health out of the dustbin of history from the 90s. No one was using it. And I said, hey, everyone, I had a group called Wireless Health, about 20,000 members at the time on LinkedIn, now called Digital Health, over 100,000 members. And I said, we should use this term because everything we're talking about, e-health, m-health, wireless health, health IT, the EHRs, telehealth, I think I mentioned that. Everything is really digital. Why don't we just simplify what we're talking about? So I didn't coin the term, but I take responsibility for creating the meme, if you will, and branding a multi-billion-dollar industry and really changing the lexicon of healthcare as we know it. So with those grandiose claims, so I guess I'm not rich, but I'm somewhat famous in digital health, if you will. So with that, I'm really delighted to be joined by Karthik today. And I've worked with Apollo Hospitals in the past on a WEF digital health committee they had for a short period of time. So Karthik, can you please introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll go into some questions.
Sure. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Paul. So I'll keep it brief. I basically a physician by training. I've kind of pursued business management after my medical degree to look at how healthcare professionals kind of bridge the gap between delivery of healthcare service and everything that's happening in terms of technology and development between pharma, medtech, service delivery, etc. Primarily have been in techno-commercial roles across biopharma and medtech for the past couple of years. Have had a chance to work with some of the leading tech companies in terms of, I would use the word digital health, Paul, as you mentioned, in terms of developing both the hardware as well as the connectivity, a part of certain IoT devices, point of care devices, which typically help monitor, you can say, signals from the heart with cardiology applications, imaging applications with ultrasound, CT, MRI, which also help in second opinion or taking additional clinical consultations if the need be. Also in the recent past, worked with certain patient-reported outcome algorithms, where we are now looking at beyond the healthcare ecosystem when the patient goes back home. How do we look at patient-monitored healthcare or patient-monitored signs and symptoms? And last but not the least, I think the most relevant one about the clinical relevance and practical implications of artificial intelligence in healthcare, in specific settings like oncology, cardiology, diabetes management. This has been in brief, mostly looking at techno-commercial roles, but working closely with the tech and the engineering or the product teams to see how can we make products and solutions more practical, and making sure that the voice of the consumer is built into making of the product and the solution, so that the usage or the actual use case is very practical and has an impact on clinical outcome in patients. So that's in brief about what I've done. My current association with Apollo Hospital possibly brings me closest to service delivery directly to patients, and I'm looking at how can we bring some of the best practices to actually being able to measure positive impact in patients' clinical outcome. Yeah.
It's a fascinating background. I think when we first connected, Karthik, I was intrigued by the combination of pharmaceuticals and healthcare, and how you bridged those two worlds in, I think, a more direct way with digital health, as we've talked about. So maybe you could expand a little bit more on, what you've seen in this last year and going into this year, as far as the connection between pharmaceuticals and healthcare service delivery. I think that's an intriguing area.
Absolutely. I think for long, if we were to broadly classify use cases in digital health, we've looked at digital health being, in the forefront across four major verticals in healthcare. The first major vertical, which I think almost all of us are very familiar with, is diagnostics, or in fact, I would even say monitoring and then diagnostics. Monitoring would include all of those point of care devices, the wearables, the digital sensors, etc., that we would have heard of, which help monitor specific clinical parameters and connect them either remotely to a clinician or to a healthcare ecosystem. The second one we're also very familiar with is diagnostics or diagnosis, basically. The third one is treatment decision making, which possibly started with the Watson Health, and now we have multiple versions of clinical decision making systems powered by data, powered by intelligence, artificial intelligence algorithm. But the one thing that I'm seeing as possibly the fastest emerging trend in this space is what we call, and that links that links your question about the most recent trend connecting pharma to healthcare service delivery, is digital therapeutics. Now, digital therapeutics possibly is the most fascinating, tech, which is kind of very nicely plugged into pharmaceutical prescription, where what digital therapeutics additionally brings to the table is that it really helps monitor patients' compliance. It tries to possibly make personalized healthcare or personalized medicine, as we call, more closer to reality. And now we have published papers published across cardiology, endocrinology, and diabetes applications, and a little early from an oncology perspective, but in some of the primary care specialties, where prescribing digital therapeutic applications together with pharmaceutical therapeutics has already established incremental positive clinical outcome in patients. So I think digital therapeutics is possibly the most relevant topic in the current context, which possibly links pharma and healthcare services delivery in the best possible way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. When we talk about healthcare services and becoming digital, I recently wrote a study on the digital front door in healthcare, and as I define it, it's the virtual embodiment of a healthcare organization. So, how do you see healthcare services becoming more and more digital, and will they become totally digital to an extent in the future?
Oh, yes. I think there are multiple ways in which I think healthcare is turning digital. Broadly, if I were to look at some of the key aspects of healthcare, one, I think we could possibly start with the basic, the fundamental level of healthcare, which is primary healthcare. Primary healthcare, to a great extent, used to be defined as family physicians. What we have recently seen is that many of the patients who are looking for primary healthcare service could be to manage an infection, could be to manage their blood pressure, could be to manage their respiratory illness, a lung infection, common problems as we see, much before going to a family physician, are now looking at self-monitoring through healthcare kiosks or point of care devices, get some initial vital parameters, get the initial consultation from a primary healthcare physician, and then only if required, go see a doctor face-to-face. I believe this is really helping in terms of bringing down the burden on the outpatient healthcare ecosystem, where only those patients that really need to see a doctor in person would actually go and see a doctor, and it would really kind of filter out a vast majority of patients who need just routine screening or triaging, as we call, which can very well be done through connected health by just remotely connecting a physician with the patient. So we're seeing that really coming up as a big trend. All of this, I think, really enabled by 4G and 5G mobile technology, and of course, fast internet that's available across homes and offices as well. That's one thing that I'm really seeing. And again, you can say the pandemic possibly played a significant role in this digital transformation. If one were to look at what was the penetration of this behavior of a patient wanting to proactively connect remotely to a doctor prior to the pandemic, I would say it was possibly like 10% or in the single digits. But what we have seen is almost a 6 to 8% exponential growth in that population now wanting to remotely connect with doctors for routine consultations. I think that's the initial change that we have seen in the way how primary healthcare service delivery has kind of transformed. Yeah, beyond that, maybe I'll just take another few seconds. In secondary and tertiary healthcare, it's mostly referred healthcare. So what earlier patients had to be physically prescribed to go see or seek a second opinion or seek a specialist if a specialist opinion was required. Now we see that most patients are holding DigiLockers, which basically ensure that all of their healthcare records are on a cloud or on a DigiLocker. And it is extremely easy for patients to now seek second opinion or a specialist opinion, which typically requires at least one face-to-face consultation. And they're now able to seamlessly move from primary to secondary to tertiary healthcare referrals, thanks to that transformation. So I think these are the things that I thought would be relevant.
Yeah, a lot of friction reduction happening with those technologies. One thing you mentioned that was particularly interesting was the healthcare kiosks and how those could sort of, I guess, extend the reach of, say, Apollo hospitals into, beyond your current population even, and reach, other patient populations and bring in new patients to the hospital system. And I'm not sure if you want to expand on that a little bit. I think, Stan, we're coming up on time, so I don't want to go too long.
No, this is an important question. Please do go ahead.
Absolutely. So what we have seen, I think I'll answer that question in a little different way as well. To a great, I think for a great period of time, the choice of choosing which hospital ecosystem to go after was primarily determined by what you say, the clinical expertise of doctors, to a great extent word of mouth, and to a great extent recommendations from people that had been to hospital ecosystems. What I have seen change possibly in the last 2 to 3 years is a lot of the established healthcare ecosystems have really seriously looked at publishing outcomes data, clinical outcome data. And consumers are now looking at, if I were to choose this hospital ecosystem, what are my chances of having a better clinical outcome? I think that is where a lot of healthcare consumer behavior has changed in the past 2 to 3 years. So the way how Apollo Hospitals is looking as we speak is to truly focus on outcomes. It's not about volumes. If we are able to deliver better outcomes in possibly the shortest span of time or the most optimal span of time at the optimal cost, given that we are a private service provider, I think that would be the most compliant way, or possibly the most trustworthy way of really getting patients to trust the healthcare ecosystem and possibly get more patients into that referred into the ecosystem as well. And we're seeing the trend across primary, secondary, and tertiary. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It makes sense. It's almost like becoming the Toyota of healthcare, because then your reputation precedes you and you become the hospital system of choice for patients.
Absolutely. Just try to take baby steps there and do our best. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I kind of liked it. Thank you, Karthik. I really appreciate your time and learning more about your work and what you're doing. And Stan, I think you might have jumped off, but
nope, still here.
Okay, there you are.
Now, thank you both, Paul, for a tremendous interview, and Karthik, again, happy Republic Day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Stan.
Thanks, Stan.